Rain hammered the 80-floor glass of the penthouse like it was trying to break into the world Adrian Vale had spent 12 years building, and Harper Quinn stood in the middle of it, still wearing her smoke-stained ER hoodie, her badge clipped crooked at her chest, her hair damp with the sweat of an 18-hour shift, staring at the reflection of a woman who looked like she had no business being married to a billionaire. 3 hours had passed since she and Adrian had signed the emergency marriage license on the top floor of Vale Tower. 3 hours since his security detail had whisked them into this penthouse and locked down every entrance. 3 hours since her life had stopped belonging only to her. She still hadn't processed the wedding, the vows, the ring, the whispered apology he'd given her in the elevators. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this, Harper, but I swear I'll explain everything." Now the explanation was standing behind her. She felt him before she heard him, the quiet, heavy exhale of a man who had spent years hiding his fear from the world and had finally run out of places to bury it. She turned slowly, her pulse kicking like a trapped animal, and saw Adrian in the doorway, black dress shirt, soaked at the shoulders from the rain, silver-gray eyes, haunted hair, slightly undone, like he'd run his hands through it too many times. But what stopped her breath wasn't his beauty, it was his hands. They were shaking. Adrian Vale, the man whose face appeared on Forbes, covers the man who negotiated billion-dollar deals. Without blinking, the man whose employees whispered that he didn't even know how to be afraid was shaking. He stepped toward her in slow, measured strides, like each one cost him something. "Harper." His voice cracked. She froze. He swallowed hard, then lifted a small black object, a titanium case, no bigger than a jewelry box, sealed with biometric edges and government-grade locks. "I need," his throat bobbed, "to put this inside you." The words punched the air out of her lungs. She took an involuntary step back until the cold glass of the window pressed between her shoulder blades, rain, vibrating behind her like a shiver she couldn't escape. Well, what she whispered, heart slamming. Adrian's jaw tensed. "Right now. If I don't, everything I built will be gone by morning." The room shrank around her. The city below blurred into streaks of yellow and white. Her mind went blank, except for one spiraling, humiliating, impossible thought. He married me for this, for sex, for something he thinks I owe him because he saved my sister from medical debt. Because I said yes in that boardroom. Her stomach twisted. Heat crawled up her neck. Is this what he expects on our wedding night? This fast, this soon? This transactional? She didn't realize she'd whispered the words out loud until she heard her own voice trembling. You want to put something inside me." Adrian's eyes widened, not with lust, not with calculation, but with raw urgency. Rain flashed behind him like a strobe. He stepped closer, and the scent of his rain-dampened cologne wrapped around her like a trap she couldn't escape. He raised his left hand, placed his thumb on the titanium case, and a red sensor blinked alive. The lid released with a hiss. Harper couldn't breathe. Inside sat a metallic device, sleek silver curved like a medical implant, but heavier, thicker, more intimidating than anything she had seen in the ER. Not a harmless sticker, not a wearable. This looked like it belonged in a military vault. Her voice fractured. What is that?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. His gaze flicked to the windows as lightning cracked over Los Angeles, flashing white across his face, revealing the fear no one else had ever been allowed to see. "If they take me down tonight," he whispered, "they'll drag you with me. The media, the government, the foreign investors trying to gut the company. They won't just destroy Vailtech, they'll destroy you." Me, Harper's heartbeat stuttered. Why me? He closed his eyes a moment, pinching the bridge of his nose like he was holding himself together by threads. "Because you're my wife now, legally. And if I don't transfer access, if I don't secure the company through you, they can stage a takeover, freeze my assets, and pin the entire scandal on you. You'd lose your job, your license, everything." Harper's pulse roared in her ears. "I still don't understand why putting that," she pointed at the device with a shaking hand, "inside my body is the solution." Adrian opened his eyes. They were storm bright and desperate. "This is a Life Vault access patch. It carries the biometric encryption for $40 billion worth of intellectual property. If it stays in my possession until midnight, Chloe Laurent and the foreign board members will seize control. But if it's embedded under your skin, activated by your heartbeat, Vailtech becomes untouchable. You become untouchable." Harper felt dizzy. "Under my skin, Adrian. I'm not. This is insane. It's the only way." His voice broke like something inside him finally snapped. "Harper, please. If you don't do this, I lose everything. And they'll come after you next." Her knees weakened. The rain outside intensified, lashing the glass so hard it sounded like the sky itself was warning her. She stared at him, this man she barely knew, this husband she didn't choose. With her heart, this billionaire who looked at her like she was the last life raft he had left, and whispered, horrified, breathless, "Wait, you're putting that inside me." The moment hung between them, charged electric, unbearable. And then cut to 12 hours earlier. 12 hours earlier, Harper Quinn walked out of the Los Angeles Memorial ER with her shoulders slumped beneath the weight of an 18-hour shift, her hoodie still clinging to the scent of smoke from the apartment fire that had sent 6 patients into her trauma bay. Her shoes soaked with a cocktail of rainwater saline, and someone spilled coffee from hour 13. The California sun was setting behind a hazy orange skyline, but she barely noticed. Her mind was still replaying the moment she'd pressed her palms against the chest of a teenage boy, whispering, "Stay with me, kid," even as alarms screamed overhead. Her muscles ached, her stomach growled, and all she wanted was the microwaved burrito waiting in her apartment freezer if her electricity hadn't been shut off again. She fished for her keys when her phone vibrated with a number she didn't recognize. Sleek, official, the kind of number that didn't belong to friends or debt collectors. "Miss Quinn," a crisp-clipped voice said the moment she answered. "This is Grayson Wood, legal counsel for Vailtech Industries. Mr. Adrian Vail requires your presence at Vail Tower immediately." Harper blinked, confused. The Adrian Vail, as in billionaire Adrian Vail, correct." The attorney's tone left no room for doubt. "Transportation is already en route. Please be outside in 60 seconds. "Wait, what? Why me?" But the call ended before she could finish. Harper stared at her phone like it had personally offended her. She didn't know Adrian Vail. Not really. She'd seen him once, 4 months ago, on the side of the 405 freeway. His Tesla crushed against a guardrail after a black SUV had slammed into him and sped off. She'd been first responder on scene, cutting his seatbelt, bracing his neck, whispering calm into his panic-sharp breathing as she stopped the bleeding on his forehead with her bare hands. He'd gripped her wrist, then tight, desperate, and said, "Don't let go." She hadn't. She stayed with him until paramedics arrived. She never expected to hear from him again. Billionaires didn't remember ER nurses. They didn't remember women like her. A black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a stop in front of her. A suited driver stepped out, opened the back door, and said simply, "Miss Quinn, please." Harper climbed in, still half convinced she was dreaming or hallucinating from sleep deprivation. The leather interior smelled like cedar and money. The city blurred past as they sped toward downtown LA, toward the iconic silver tower she'd only ever seen on magazine covers, the headquarters of Vailtech. Every floor glittered like a different universe she didn't belong to. When the SUV pulled up to the private entrance, the glass doors parted instantly. Inside, hundreds of employees bustled across polished marble floors, dressed in sleek suits, flashing security badges, speaking in rapid-fire tech jargon she didn't understand. Harper tugged at her hoodie self-consciously, painfully aware she looked like she'd wandered in from another planet. A woman with a severe bun and a tablet scanned her from head to toe, frowning. "You're the nurse Mr. Vale requested," Harper flushed. Yes, follow me." They entered a gold-toned express elevator that shot upwards so fast her ears popped. She watched floor numbers climb 20, 33, 47, 62 until they stopped at 78. The doors opened to a hallway so quiet it barely seemed to exist, the air smelling like eucalyptus and wealth. And then he appeared. Adrian Vale stood at the end of the corridor, silhouetted by sunlight, pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored gray shirt, rolled at the sleeves, a faint scar tracing the line of his temple from the crash she'd pulled him out of. But his eyes, those silver-gray eyes she remembered from the freeway, were exhausted, hollowed, as if he hadn't slept in days. When he saw her, something inside him loosened. His posture softened, his jaw unclenched. He exhaled like someone who'd been underwater too long and finally surfaced. He walked toward her with urgency, but not aggression, like a man clinging to the last thread of something real. "Harper," he breathed, stopping just inches from her. "Thank you for coming." She stared up at him, stunned by how different he looked from the photos online. Less polished, more human, more breakable. Your lawyer called. I don't know what's going on." Adrian ran a shaky hand through his hair, a rare crack in the armor of the most controlled man in the tech world. "I need your help," he said quietly, with a sincerity that sliced straight through her defenses. "And I trust you more than anyone in this building." Her heart stuttered. "Why me? I'm just a nurse." He shook his head. "You're the only person who stayed with me when I couldn't keep myself together. You didn't care about my money or my title or the cameras. You just saved me." She swallowed hard. "That was my job." "No," he said, eyes locking on hers with startling intensity. "It was your instinct." For a moment they stood in silence, the billionaire and the ER nurse. Two people who should never have crossed paths again until Adrian opened a glass door beside them and motioned her inside. A private conference room glowed with dozens of digital screens, displaying news alert stock tickers and documents stamped with government seals. A storm, figurative and literal, was building. He turned to her, jaw tight. "Harper, something is happening today that I can't stop alone. If I don't act fast, everything I've built, my company, my legacy, will be gone." She frowned. "And what does that have to do with me?" Adrian inhaled slowly, like what he was about to say would change her life. "Because, Harper, I'm running out of people I can trust." "And you?" He swallowed. You might be the only one left. Her pulse quickened, though she had no idea why. What do you need from me? His eyes wavered just for a second. A flicker of vulnerability flashed across his face. A lot more than I have any right to ask. And that was the moment, though neither of them knew it yet, when the fate of a $40 billion empire shifted toward the ER nurse who never believed she deserved to stand in the same world as a billionaire. Harper didn't sit, mostly because her legs felt too unstable to trust, but also because every instinct in her body told her that whatever Adrian Vale was about to say required her full attention and maybe even something harder than bravery. He paced in front of the digital screens as stock prices flickered in red government notifications pulsed on the glass walls, and a countdown timer on the central monitor read 11 hours 42 minutes. Adrian stopped, abruptly turned toward her, and said, "They're coming for the company." Harper blinked. Who's they? The foreign investors Chloe aligned with, he said, jaw tight. They've been waiting for a weakness, any weakness to activate the takeover clause in our bylaws. And as of this morning, they found one. What weakness? Adrian let out a humorless breath. Me. Harper frowned. I don't understand. I never married, he said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. Serena, my fiancée, died before we could, and I never filled the position again. Harper stiffened at the raw pain in his voice, then looked at the documents projected behind him. And how does that matter? Adrian pressed a button on the table. A page zoomed in, a legal clause buried deep in corporate policy. He pointed. This, the Heir Protection Clause. It was written by my father decades ago. It prevents any foreign entity from assuming majority control unless the current CEO is either deceased or unmarried without succession. Her brows knitted. Succession as in a family. He nodded. The board used to think it was archaic, an old-fashioned rule meant to protect the company from hostile takeovers, and for years it didn't matter. He closed his eyes briefly, swallowing something jagged, till this morning when Chloe Laurent filed a petition declaring me unfit to maintain control due to unresolved trauma, instability, and lack of familial grounding. Harper stared. She actually used the word trauma. She visited Serena's grave yesterday, he said flatly, and posted the photo online with a cryptic caption about executives haunted by the past. It went viral overnight. Harper felt a spike of anger on his behalf. That's disgusting, it's strategic, Adrian corrected softly. She knows I'm vulnerable there, so she's painting the picture of a lonely, unstable CEO without a support system. Harper crossed her arms. But what does any of this have to do with me? Adrian met her gaze head on. Because the clause can only be neutralized if I'm married. The silence swallowed her whole. Rain tapped the windows like nervous fingers. Harper blinked once, twice. Married, she repeated slowly. Adrian nodded. Married before midnight. Her stomach dropped. You can't be serious. I wish I weren't. Adrian. He raised a hand, stopping her. I know how this sounds. I know I'm asking something outrageous. But I need a wife before they convene the emergency board meeting. And it can't be anyone in my world. Not a socialite. Not a business partner. Not someone with ties to Chloe or foreign interests. It has to be someone outside the political mess. Someone who can't be bought. Someone strong. Her chest tightened. And you chose me. You saved my life, he said simply. You didn't treat me like a billionaire bleeding on the freeway. You treated me like a human being who needed you. I haven't forgotten that. She blew out a shaky breath. Adrian, I'm not the kind of woman CEOs marry. Look at me. Her voice cracked on the last word. She gestured toward her hoodie, her messy hair, her broad shoulders. I'm not elegant. I'm not polished. I'm big. Strong Adrian corrected instantly. She shook her head. No, people look at me and assume I'm too much. Too tall, too heavy, too loud, not enough of what they expect. His jaw clenched, his eyes softened. He stepped closer, not with billionaire dominance, but with something gentler, something that felt like truth. Harper, he said quietly, I don't need perfect, I need strong. She swallowed hard. Why? Because everything around me is collapsing, he whispered. Because every person in my circle has a motive. Because Chloe and her allies will tear the company apart if they take it. And because the last time I trusted someone delicate, he stopped, unable to finish. Harper softened. Adrian, he forced himself to meet her gaze. I can't marry weakness again. It destroyed me once. I need someone who knows how to survive. Her breath caught. So this is a contract marriage. Yes, he admitted, a legal partnership. Temporary if you want it to be. No expectations, no obligations, no physical contact unless you choose it. Just something that keeps the vultures from circling. What about the media, she asked. What about people assuming we're in love? I'll protect you, he said immediately. From the press, from the board, from everything. You'll have security, legal coverage, financial independence. Your sister's medical bills will be erased. You'll never have to worry about being crushed by debt again. The mention of her sister Emily Pale in her hospital bed tubes, connecting her to machines. Harper worked double shifts to afford, hit her like a blow. You'd really do that, she whispered. Yes, Adrian said, without hesitation. Harper's thoughts spun the crushing bills. The long nights, the impossible choices, the fear of losing Emily. All crashing into the surreal reality of standing in the top floor of Vailtech while a billionaire offered her a marriage contract like it was the only lifeline he had left. Why me? She whispered again, softer this time. Adrian stepped so close she could see the storm of exhaustion and hope swirling in his eyes. Because you're the only person who looked at me on that freeway and didn't see a billionaire. You saw a man who needed help. And right now, Harper, I need you more than I've ever needed anyone. Her pulse kicked. Rain intensified against the glass. The countdown ticked down another minute. And Harper Quinn, the nurse who never believed she belonged in rooms like this, took a trembling breath and whispered, Okay, I'll do it. Adrian exhaled like she'd just saved him all over again. Harper didn't remember walking from the private conference room to the executive suite on the 86th floor. Didn't remember the swirl of security agents speaking into earpieces, or the legal assistants sprinting past with armfuls of documents. Didn't remember the elevator rising like a bullet toward the sky. All she remembered was the steady weight of Adrian's voice saying, We don't have time for anything elaborate. The ceremony has to happen now. Her pulse hammered louder than the storm outside. The moment the elevator doors slid open, she stepped into a room that did not feel like a place where weddings happened. It felt like a war bunker dressed in glass and gold. The conference table had been pushed aside. Screens around the room displayed stock tickers bleeding red. A digital countdown ticking mercilessly toward midnight, and several legal forms awaiting signatures. At the center of it all stood an officiant, an elderly retired judge, whose presence had the kind of quiet authority that said he'd married thousands of couples and buried just as many secrets. Mr. Vale the judge greeted tightly, eyeing the chaos around them. "Are you certain you wish to proceed with this?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "Yes." Harper inhaled sharply as two witnesses stepped forward, one of them Grayson Wood, the Vale Tech lawyer. The other a woman she recognized from earlier, Chloe Laurent. She was even more breathtaking, up-close sleek, bun-emerald silk blouse, tailored black pencil skirt, lipstick precisely the shade of danger. She surveyed Harper like one might examine a cracked window or a misaligned painting. Something broken, something out of place. "So this is her," Chloe said. Arms folded voice, honeyed with venom. "He married her. Is this a joke?" Heat burned Harper's cheeks so violently she thought she might combust. She became hyper-aware of everything, her hoodie stained with soot, her sneakers squeaking faintly on polished marble, her hair frizzing from humidity. Every insecurity she'd ever carried crawling up her spine. "Chloe," Adrian said, tone turning to ice. "If you want to keep your position in this company, you'll keep your opinions to yourself." Chloe's smile thinned dangerously. "I just find it interesting," she said sweetly, "that a CEO would rush into marriage with someone who looks like she wandered out of a grocery store parking lot." Harper flinched. Adrian stepped forward, not aggressively, but with an authority that sucked the air out of the room. "Mock her again," he said quietly, "and you're out of this company before the ink dries on the marriage certificate." Chloe froze, eyes widening at the threat. This was no empty warning. She backed off tension, slicing the space like a blade. Harper swallowed, stunned. No one had ever defended her like that. Not teachers, not coworkers, not even her father. For a fleeting moment, the shame loosened its grip. Adrian turned to the judge, exhaling. "Let's begin." Harper's heart pounded so loudly she wondered if everyone could hear it. The judge opened a folder with solemn hands. "We are gathered here today." His voice faded into a blur. Harper stared at Adrian, at the way he stood so straight, so steady, even though she could see the cracks in him, the exhaustion, the fear, the desperation he was trying so hard to hide. He wasn't marrying her out of love. He wasn't marrying her for romance or choice or destiny. He was marrying her because time was running out. And yet, as he met her gaze, something in his expression felt sincere, true, in a way that unsettled her. "Harper Quinn," the judge said, and her head snapped up. "Do you willingly enter into this marriage with Adrian Vale, agreeing to the legal responsibilities and commitments therein?" Her mouth went dry. Everyone stared at her, Chloe with contempt, Grayson with tension, Adrian with something she couldn't name. She took a breath. "Yes," she said softly. It felt like jumping off a cliff. "And you, Adrian Vale," the judge continued. "Do you willingly?" "Yes," Adrian said, not even waiting for the sentence to finish. Harper looked at him startled. His certainty was bewildering, almost reckless, almost protective. The judge nodded. "Then by the authority vested in me, by the state of California, I now pronounce you legally wed." A faint stamp echoed as he finalized the papers. Harper blinked. That was it. She was married, legally, irrevocably, married to a billionaire she had spoken to a handful of times, married to a man whose world could crush hers without effort, married to a stranger she had pulled from a wrecked Tesla and whispered, "Stay with me," to while his blood coated her hands. Chloe stepped forward, signature pad in hand. Witness signatures. Her tone was clipped. Harper tried not to tremble as she signed. Her name looked strange beside Adrian's. Wrong, uneven, out of place. But he leaned close, not touching her, just close enough for her to hear, and murmured, "Thank you." She stiffened because it didn't sound like gratitude. It sounded like something heavier, something she didn't have a name for. When the papers were done, Grayson collected them and nodded to Adrian. "We need to secure your wife in the penthouse until the next phase." Harper blinked. "Secure?" Adrian softened his tone. "Just for tonight, until we transfer the biometric access." Alarm flickered across her expression. He hesitated. "I'll explain, I promise." Chloe chuckled under her breath. "Good luck with that." She sneered, but Adrian's glare shut her up instantly. Security ushered Harper and Adrian toward a private elevator. As the doors closed, silence settled between them, like a fragile truce. Harper stared at the gold paneling. "This doesn't feel real," she whispered. "It wasn't supposed to be." Adrian said quietly, "But I'll protect you. You have my word." The elevator ascended toward the penthouse, toward the storm waiting outside, toward the night where nothing would make sense again. They stepped out into the shimmering corridors of Adrian's private world. Still keeping an awkward distance from each other, two strangers bound by a marriage neither one had planned. And as thunder rolled overhead, the truth settled in Harper's chest, like a weight she couldn't shake. She had just become Mrs. Adrian Vale, a bride with no love, a wife with no choice, a woman standing one step away from a future she didn't understand. Harper stood inside the penthouse bedroom like a misplaced shadow, the door clicking shut behind her as Adrian stepped back into the hall to take a call. She could tell he didn't want her to hear, leaving her alone with a silence far too large for her tired lungs. The room itself looked like it belonged in a magazine. Spread smooth walnut floors, charcoal walls lit with warm recessed lighting windows, towering from floor to ceiling and showing a rain-soaked Los Angeles glowing beneath the storm. But Harper couldn't absorb any of it. All she felt was the heaviness of her hoodie clinging to her chest, the faint smell of antiseptic still embedded in its fabric, the stickiness of dried sweat on her neck, the ache in her shoulders from wrestling stretchers and lifting bodies all night. She belonged in a supply closet or an ambulance bay, not in a billionaire's bedroom with a marriage certificate bearing her name. Her fingers shook as she touched the edge of the king-sized bed crisp white sheets that probably cost more than her rent. She took a step back, suddenly terrified. She would stain something just by breathing near it. What am I doing here? She'd spent her entire life feeling like she took up too much room, too tall, too broad, too noticeable. And now she was trapped in a penthouse where everything felt breakable. The pressure behind her ribs tightened until it burned. In the reflection of the window, she saw herself hair-frizzed from humidity, dark circles beneath her eyes, hoodie smudged with soot. She looked like a ghost haunting the wrong dimension. She pressed her palms to her face. "This is insane," she whispered into her hands. "Absolutely insane." Then knock-knock, polite, soft, hesitant. Her heart crashed against her chest. Harper, his voice. She swallowed hard and forced a small, brittle yes. The door opened slowly. Adrian stepped inside, his shoulders slumped under a weight she recognized far too well. The weight of a man carrying too many battles at once. He'd changed into a dry shirt, navy blue and slightly wrinkled, but his hair was still damp from the rain, a few loose strands falling across his forehead, making him look younger than the hardened CEO she'd seen earlier. But what shook her wasn't his appearance, it was his expression. He looked worried. For her. "You didn't answer for a moment," he said softly, closing the door behind him. I wasn't sure if you were okay. Harper wished she could lie, but exhaustion made honesty spill out. I don't know if I am. Adrian's eyes softened with something like guilt. Harper, I know this is overwhelming. I know you didn't ask for any of it. She hugged her arms over her chest, trying to hold something in fear, shame, confusion. I don't understand why you chose me, she admitted, voice trembling. I don't understand why I'm here in your penthouse, in your bedroom, wearing soot on my clothes, while the world thinks we're married out of love. Adrian stepped closer, slowly, as if not to startle her. We'll figure it out, he said quietly. Together. She shook her head. I'm not. Her voice cracked. I'm not what people expect when they picture the wife of a billionaire. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't care what people expect. But everyone else does, she whispered. Chloe does. The press will. Your board will. They'll see me and wonder why you chose someone like Stop. The word was gentle but firm. He moved closer again, bridging the empty air between them until she could feel his breath warming the chill on her cheek. Harper, you survived a life that would have shattered most people. You've carried your sister through hell. You've worked hours no human should. You saved strangers. You saved me. You are exactly the kind of woman who belongs in a fight for something this big. Harper's throat tightened. She turned her face toward the window, blinking against the shimmer of city lights. I'm scared, she admitted, barely audible. Adrian exhaled, and his voice turned raw. So am I. She looked at him, really looked. This wasn't the Adrian Vale the world worshipped, impeccable, untouchable, invincible. This was a man who hadn't slept in days, haunted by a past he couldn't outrun, and a betrayal he couldn't predict. A man who needed someone not delicate or perfect, but solid. We need to talk, he said quietly, rubbing the back of his neck, tension pulling at the tendons in his arms. Before midnight. Harper's pulse jumped. Midnight, the looming deadline for the takeover, and the mysterious device he hadn't yet explained. Talk. About what, she whispered. Adrian hesitated, eyes flickering away for the first time since he entered. About what comes next. Her breathing grew shallow. You mean, like, wedding night things? His head snapped up, confusion flashing across his face, before his eyes widened with realization. No, God, no, he said quickly, shaking his head. Harper, I would never. This marriage is not. He broke off, visibly rattled. You're exhausted. You're scared. You're overwhelmed. This isn't that, I swear. Heat rushed to her cheeks in mortification. People always assume. She trailed off, ashamed of how small her voice sounded. Adrian took a step closer, his voice gentling. Harper, you are my wife on paper, yes, but you don't owe me anything. Not affection, not intimacy, not a single piece of yourself you don't want to give. She exhaled shakily, but then something changed in his posture. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes sharpened with a new urgency. He lowered his voice. But you are the only person who can survive what's coming. A cold wave washed over her spine. What does that mean? He looked toward the hallway, as if checking for shadows, then back at her with a seriousness that made her blood run cold. It means the next phase isn't just legal, he whispered. It's physical. Her breath hitched. Physical. Not what you think, he said quickly, but the tension in his jaw didn't ease. Something dangerous is happening tonight. Something the board can't know about. Something Chloe suspects. Rain pounded harder against the window, as if echoing the rising panic inside her chest. Adrian, she whispered, what are you not telling me? He held her gaze, the storm in his eyes finally breaking through. That tonight, he said with a low, devastating certainty, "I'm going to have to ask you for something impossible." The storm roared louder as Adrian guided Harper out of the bedroom and down the dim hallway toward the penthouse's central living space, the kind of architectural masterpiece that would have made most people gasp. Everything marble and glass and soft golden light. But Harper barely saw any of it because her heartbeat was drowning out every other noise. The tension radiating from Adrian was so fierce, so palpable, she could feel it like static rolling off his skin. He kept glancing behind them as if expecting something to jump out of the shadows, and every time he did, her chest tightened. When they reached the center of the room, the rain thrashed against the windows, as if it were trying to claw its way inside. Adrian stopped abruptly, his jaw clenched, his breath trembled once, just once, before he masked it with the kind of resolve only desperation could build. On the coffee table sat the titanium box, sleek, government-grade, biometric sealed, threatening in its quiet stillness. Harper froze. "Please tell me," she whispered, "that this isn't something illegal." Adrian shook his head sharply. "It's not illegal, it's just dangerous." That word hit her like a blow. She swallowed hard. "And you want to put something dangerous inside me?" His eyes flicked to hers, full of urgency, fear, and something that looked painfully close to regret. "No," he said, voice tight. "Not dangerous to you, dangerous to the people trying to take everything." He moved toward the box, each step measured, careful, almost reverent. Adrian Harper whispered, unable to breathe, "Please just tell me what's inside." He hesitated. Then slowly, very slowly, he placed his thumb on the biometric sensor. A soft red glow scanned his fingerprint. The lock clicked open. A small hiss of depressurization filled the room, and Harper's stomach twisted into knots so tight she thought she might collapse. Adrian lifted the lid, and the world seemed to narrow to a single point. Inside, nestled in black, shock-absorbent foam, lay a sleek silver device the size of a credit card, but thicker curved edges, a pulse of faint blue light. Running across its surface, metallic ridges that looked like something out of a military intelligence vault rather than a billionaire's living room. He reached for it with trembling fingers. Harper stepped back instinctively, her breath catching. What is that?" Adrian didn't look at her. He stared at the object with the same expression he might use to look at a loaded weapon. "This," he said quietly, "is the Life Vault access patch, the core encryption key for everything Vailtech owns." Harper blinked. I don't understand." Adrian finally looked up, and the raw urgency in his gaze made her entire body lock in place. "This patch holds the biometric algorithm that controls access to all research data, all patents, all classified projects, all financial vaults, every piece of intellectual property we've built over 12 years. Harper's stomach dropped. $40 billion worth, he added. "If they get this, if Chloe gets it, Vailtech falls, I fall, and they will drag you down with me." Harper stared at the device like it might explode. "But why does it need to go inside me?" The rain hammered harder. Thunder rolled in the distance. Adrian tightened his grip on the patch. "Because the patch can't be used without bonding to living tissue. It needs a host, someone with a specific genetic profile, someone healthy, strong, high adaptive, low inflammation response, someone whose body won't reject the interface." Harper stared. "You tested my genetics?" "No," he said quickly. Your hospital did when you donated blood for your sister 2 years ago. The database is public for medical use. Your profile was flagged as rare optimal physiology. Harper blinked, stunned. She didn't know whether to feel violated, honored, or terrified. Adrian stepped closer, close enough for her to see the reflection of blue light flickering across his eyes. "You're the only person I trust with this," he whispered. "The only person strong enough to handle the activation period. Anyone else could go into shock, but you have a body built for survival." Harper. He wasn't complimenting her, he wasn't objectifying her. He was stating a scientific fact with reverence, like her biology itself was a miracle. It made her chest ache. "But how does it—" "Go inside me," she whispered. He exhaled shakily. "It's just a dermal bonding patch," he said. "No needles, no surgery. It embeds under the top layer of skin and dissolves the outer casing, leaving the encryption chip under your dermis for 72 hours. Harper blinked. "So, like a high-tech sticker." "Yes," he said, "but with global consequences." The storm howled outside. Her pulse thundered inside her. Adrian's voice dropped to a fragile whisper. "Harper, if they take me down tonight, you're the only one who can stop them. You're the only one who can shield the company from the takeover. You're the only one who can keep Chloe from framing me and from dragging you into the mud with me." His throat bobbed. "You are the only person who can carry this." Harper felt her knees weaken. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why would you trust me with something this important?" Adrian's eyes flickered with a pain she didn't understand. Old pain, deep pain, the kind that left scars invisible to the world. "Because everyone else in my life has chosen power over people," he said. "But you," he stepped closer, too close. "You saved me without asking who I was. You stayed with me when I was bleeding and terrified. And when I looked at you that night, I didn't see someone who would break." Harper's vision blurred with emotion she couldn't name. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know if I can do this." Adrian reached out, not touching her, just hovering a trembling hand near her arm like he was afraid she might shatter. "You can," he whispered, "but I won't force you." She stared at the patch, at Adrian, at the future waiting to collapse. And for the first time since entering the penthouse, she understood something terrifying. Adrian Vale wasn't fearless. He was desperate. And he believed she was the only person who could save him. Her voice trembled as she whispered the words that echoed through the room like a shockwave. "Why me? Why put that inside my body?" Adrian's eyes softened with something heartbreakingly sincere. "Because if they take me down," he murmured, "you're the only one strong enough to protect everything." And Harper froze, caught between terror, disbelief, and a dawning truth more frightening than the storm outside. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. The storm raged outside like the sky itself was tearing open. Lightning illuminating Adrian's face in sharp flashes, every flicker revealing a man, stretched thin, cracked at the seams, held together only by sheer force of will. Harper felt her heartbeat climbing into her throat, her breath tight, her palms sweating, even though the penthouse air was cool. She didn't know what terrified her more, the device pulsing faint blue in his hand, or the way he looked at her like she was his last lifeline. Finally, he broke the silence with a hoarse whisper. "You deserve to know the truth." Harper swallowed. The truth about what Adrian set the life vault patch back into its foam cradle, as if he feared his own hands might crush it. Then he stepped back, braced a hand on the edge of the table, and exhaled shakily, like every word he was about to say would cost him blood. "About why I can't trust anyone else," he said. "Why I can't let this fall into the wrong hands. Why I chose you." Harper's chest tightened. "Adrian?" He didn't look at her. Not yet. His gaze drifted toward the rain-smeared windows, toward the city stretching endlessly below, lights flickering like dying stars. 3 years ago, he began voice low. "I was supposed to get married." Harper's breath hitched. She knew this. Everyone knew this. The billionaire tragedy, Serena Blake, the brilliant philanthropist with the delicate frame and the soft laugh. Her sudden death had shocked the nation, but she hadn't known the details, not the real ones, not the ones carved into Adrian's bones. Serena was... He stopped, swallowed, forced the words out. She was small, fragile, not just emotionally, physically. She had a congenital heart condition no one knew about, not even her. She hid symptoms, hid her shortness of breath, hid her chest pain. She didn't want to seem weak. He let out a broken breath. One morning she collapsed in our kitchen, just like that. 1 minute she was laughing, the next. His voice cracked on the last word. Harper felt her stomach plunge. Adrian closed his eyes, pressing the heel of his palm against them for a moment, as if trying to block the memory out. They tried everything: CPR, shock, IV meds, surgery prep. But her heart... He shook his head. Her heart wasn't strong enough. Lightning flashed. Harper's breath trembled. She whispered softly, "I'm so sorry." Adrian didn't answer immediately. When he finally opened his eyes, they glistened not with tears he'd let fall, but with tears he was still fighting. For months after she died, he said quietly, "I blamed myself, believed I'd somehow broken her, that if I had chosen someone stronger, someone healthier, someone..." Harper stepped forward instinctively. "Adrian, no, that's not," but that's how Chloe spun it. He cut in sharply, bitterness slicing his voice. "She told the board that my judgment was compromised, that I married someone too fragile for this life, that I needed someone who could balance my intensity." Harper felt a spike of anger. "That's cruel." "It was calculated," Adrian murmured. And they listened. He finally turned toward her. The vulnerability in his eyes hit her like a physical force. "I watched the woman I loved die because she was too delicate for the world we lived in, too fragile to survive the pressure, too trusting of a life that demanded more strength than she had." His voice grew rough, a confession dragged from the deepest corner of his chest. "And ever since that day, every time I look at someone gentle, someone small, someone delicate, all I feel is terror." Harper's throat tightened. Terror of losing them, terror. He whispered that I'd destroy them simply by being in their life. Her heart cracked. This wasn't a billionaire afraid of failure. This was a man afraid of breaking someone again. Harper stepped closer, speaking barely above a breath. "Adrian, strength isn't a shield from grief, and fragility isn't a flaw. Serena's death wasn't your fault." He let out a hollow laugh void of humor. "Tell that to the board. Tell that to the media. Tell that to my own nightmares." He dragged a hand through his hair. "Do you know what they told me after Serena died? That my future wife needed to be structurally compatible with the demands of my position." Harper blinked. "Structurally compatible. Their words, not mine," he said tightly, "meaning someone who could withstand stress, public scrutiny, long hours, intense environments, someone who wouldn't collapse under pressure, literally or metaphorically." Harper stared at him, stunned. "That's insane." "It's corporate politics," he muttered. "Cold, cruel, efficient. Then his voice softened, a dangerous softness, the kind born of grief long buried. And when the takeover clause resurfaced this morning when Chloe proposed her narrative of CEO instability when they questioned my judgment again, his gaze lifted to hers. I realized the only person I could trust with the future of this company was someone whose strength I didn't have to question, someone who had already proven she wouldn't break. Harper felt the air leave her lungs. "You mean me?" He nodded once, slow, fragile. "Harper, when you pulled me out of that car wreck you handled, pressure most people would crumble under. You held my head steady, stopped the bleeding, kept me conscious when I wanted to pass out. And you didn't panic not once. You were a rock." Her vision blurred. "I was doing my job." "No," Adrian whispered. "You were doing what comes naturally to you." He stepped closer again, his voice trembling. "You didn't treat me like a billionaire bleeding on asphalt. You treated me like a man, and you didn't break. Not when I was losing blood. Not when I grabbed your wrist. Not when I begged you not to let go." He inhaled sharply. "It was the first time since Serena died that I wasn't terrified of ruining someone by needing them." Harper's chest tightened painfully. "Strong doesn't mean unbreakable, Adrian," she whispered. "Everyone breaks. Not alone," he countered firmly. "Not if someone stays with them." "And Harper," his voice cracked, "I would die before letting you break alone." Harper's breath hitched. Something inside her, and something that had been hardened by years of exhaustion, financial fear, loneliness, fractured and softened all at once. She didn't know if it was his pain, his honesty, or the vulnerability he'd fought so long to hide. But in that moment, Harper felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Something she didn't dare name. "Adrian," she said shakily, "you don't have to carry all of this alone." He gave a small broken laugh. "But I do. That's the burden of power." "No," she whispered. "Not anymore." For a long moment they just stood there, rain howling outside, thunder vibrating through the glass city lights. Shimmering in the storm, two people who never should have crossed paths, bound together by desperation, pain and something quietly forming between them. Then Adrian spoke again, barely audible. "Harper, I'm terrified." She nodded. "So am I." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile truce, a quiet promise, a shared breath in the middle of chaos. And for the first time, Harper understood this billionaire didn't need her strength for his company. He needed it for his heart. The storm outside intensified until it sounded like the sky was ripping apart, but inside the penthouse, everything narrowed into a fragile, trembling silence. So thin a whisper could shatter it. Harper stood frozen, staring at Adrian as if the gravity of his confession had pulled the floor out from under her. All the armor she wore, sarcasm, strength, grit, crumbled at once. She tried to inhale, but her breath shook so violently she almost choked on it. The weight of her entire life being overlooked, underestimated, body-shamed, survival-driven, responsible for a sick sister, and endless medical bills collided with the sudden realization that someone as powerful as Adrian Vale saw her as strong, worthy, capable. It was too much. All of it. And her knees buckled. Adrian moved before she hit the ground. He caught her elbows, steadying her gently, carefully, as if she were glass, and he was terrified of breaking her. But Harper knew she wasn't glass. She was stone. Cracked, weathered, chipped. But stone. Still she trembled uncontrollably, her breath jagged. "Harper," he whispered, lowering himself with her, until they were both kneeling on the floor, the polished marble cold beneath their legs, the scent of rain and heat mixing in the air. "Talk to me. Tell me what's happening." She shook her head, unable to form words. A sob caught in her throat, not loud, not dramatic. Just a single broken sound she'd swallowed for years, the kind of sound you only let out when you are finally unbearably tired of being strong. Adrian's face softened in a way that terrified her more than anything else. Not pity, never pity, but understanding, empathy, and something softer, quieter, infinitely more dangerous care. "Breathe with me," he murmured, lifting one hand to hover near her cheek, but stopping short of touching her, waiting for permission she didn't know how to give. Just breathe, slowly. Harper squeezed her eyes shut. I don't know if I can." "You can," he said, voice low, steady, anchoring. "Because I'm right here." She inhaled shakily, exhaled unsteadily, again and again, each breath less fractured than the last. Adrian remained there, kneeling in front of her, a billionaire CEO grounding a nurse who'd carried too much weight for too long. She didn't know how long they stayed like that, seconds, minutes, but eventually her breathing steadied enough for her to whisper, "I'm sorry." His eyes sharpened instantly. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "Don't ever apologize for breaking. I shouldn't have dumped all of this on you at once." She looked up at him, vulnerability raw in her gaze. "It's not that. It's everything." Her voice cracked. "I've held things together for so long, and now I'm here in a penthouse. I don't belong in, married to a billionaire. I barely know holding the fate of a $40 billion company, and her breath hitched, tears threatening again. "I don't know how to carry all of this." Adrian leaned in his forehead, nearly touching hers, his voice so gentle she barely recognized it as the same man who commanded boardrooms. "Then don't carry it alone." Something inside her snapped, not in pain, but in release. Her body leaned forward instinctively, her forehead resting lightly against his. A soft, accidental touch, electric, intimate, human. Adrian stiffened at the first contact, not in discomfort, but in shock, like he hadn't expected her to reach for him, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, even in a moment of weakness. His breath faltered, but then he melted, just an inch, just enough. "You can lean on me," he whispered, "not because you owe me anything, but because you deserve to." Harper closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She wasn't sobbing, it wasn't messy. It was quiet, so quiet that the storm outside swallowed the sound entirely. Adrian lifted a hand, slowly giving her time to pull away, to reject the closeness, but she didn't. So he let his fingertips touch her cheek, catching one tear with a tenderness that felt foreign, frightening, and safe all at once. Harper's breath stuttered. She leaned into his palm, just barely, just enough to feel warmth against the cold ache beneath her skin. "I've never had someone to lean on," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I've always had to be the strong one." Adrian's jaw clenched, eyes burning with something fierce. "Then let me be strong for you now." Her heart twisted painfully in her chest. He didn't kiss her. He didn't try. He didn't need to. The intimacy came in breaths, in silence, in shared vulnerability that couldn't be stolen or faked. Slowly, he let his forehead rest fully against hers. Their noses brushed, their breaths mingled, warm and unsteady. Lightning flashed behind them, illuminating two trembling silhouettes. Leaning into each other like the storm outside had forced the truth out of both their bodies. Harper whispered, "Adrian." "I'm scared." So am I, he murmured. But fear doesn't mean weakness, it means you care. Another tear slipped down her cheek. Adrian caught that one too. I don't want to fail you, she breathed. You can't, he said instantly. Because you're already saving me. Something warm bloomed low in her chest. Dangerous, tender, new. She didn't pull away. When he shifted closer, their knees touching now, their shoulders brushing his hand, settling lightly, so lightly on her upper arm. Not gripping, not claiming, supporting. Harper felt her walls collapse, all of them. Years of fighting, scrubbing, running, surviving, melting in the heat of a man who saw her truly. Saw her without judgment or expectation. She swallowed. Adrian, yes. She lifted her gaze, eyes shining. I'm not delicate, I know, he whispered. That's why I trust you. Then, with careful, deliberate gentleness, he reached for the life vault patch and held it between them. Not pushing, not pressuring, offering. May I? Harper exhaled slowly, fear and courage twisting together in her chest. Will it hurt? Not even a little, he murmured. All you'll feel is warmth. She nodded once, shaky but sure. Adrian leaned forward, brushing her hair away from her shoulder in the softest motion, his fingers barely grazing her skin. A hush fell over the room, like even the storm paused. Harper shivered. Not from cold, from sensation, from closeness, from trust. Adrian pressed the patch gently onto the curve where her shoulder met her collarbone. It adhered with a soft click. A pulse of gentle blue light seeped into her skin, spreading warmth like a small sun blooming beneath the surface. Harper inhaled sharply. Oh, Adrian touched her arm lightly. It's okay, that's normal. The warmth spread deeper, softer, soothing instead of shocking, and Harper felt her breath settle into something calmer, steadier. She looked up at him. It's not bad. I told you, he whispered, relief washing through his voice. Then he leaned his forehead back against hers, their breaths mingling again in quiet, trembling closeness. You're not alone, Harper. Not tonight. Not in this. She let herself lean into him fully now, no hesitation left. Neither are you, she whispered. And for the first time since Serena's death, Adrian believed it. Morning broke over Los Angeles like a reluctant truth. Soft pale light pushing through the dissolving storm clouds, staining the penthouse in shades of gold and ash. Harper barely slept, maybe an hour, maybe less, but not from fear anymore. From adrenaline, from the weight of what now pulsed softly beneath her skin, the activated life vault patch. Her fingertips drifted toward it, feeling the faint warmth through her hoodie. It didn't hurt, it didn't burn. It felt like a heartbeat that wasn't hers, yet somehow was. Adrian hadn't left her side all night. He'd stayed near close enough to anchor her, but far enough to respect the boundaries he'd promised. At dawn, he stood by the glass wall phone in hand, staring down at the city, as if preparing to go to war. Harper watched him for a moment, broad shoulders tense, jaw set, eyes shadowed but sharp. The man who had knelt on the marble floor last night trembling with vulnerability was gone. In his place stood the CEO the world feared. But when he turned to her, that hardness cracked just enough. Harper, he said softly, it's time. She nodded, even though fear tightened her stomach. 30 minutes later, they entered the executive boardroom of Vailtech 86th floor glass walls. Overlooking the city, a long obsidian table, surrounded by 12 board members who had controlled the rhythm of Adrian's life since he was 25. They didn't stand when he entered. They didn't bow their heads in respect. They stared at her. Whispers rippled like poison. The nurse, is he serious? This is embarrassing. He married her. Chloe Laurent stood near the head of the table, a picture of polished cruelty. Sleek bun, blood-red lips, tailored suit that screamed silent superiority. Her arms crossed her smile, razor-thin. Adrian, she purred, so good of you to finally join us. We've been waiting. Harper felt heat crawl up her neck, but Adrian stepped subtly in front of her, a silent shield, a quiet dare. Let's get this over with, Adrian, said voice cool steel. I'm assuming this meeting is about the takeover clause, Chloe smirked, among other concerns. She flicked her eyes toward Harper, like she was something scraped off a shoe, including your questionable marital decision. Harper stiffened. Adrian's tone dropped to lethal softness. Mock her again, and you're out of this company. A gasp traveled the room. Even Chloe blinked. Harper felt something warm ignite in her chest. Protection, loyalty, defiance. Chloe recovered quickly, raising a manicured brow. Well, that's quite the threat to make, while standing on the brink of being removed yourself. Adrian's jaw tightened. I'm not on the brink of anything. Chloe clasped her hands behind her back and began pacing slowly. Let's review the situation, she said, tone dripping with condescension. Vailtech is facing the most significant intellectual property breach in its history. Our foreign partners are demanding stability and questioning your emotional fitness to lead. Your impulsive marriage to an outsider. She eyed Harper again, only confirms their fears. Harper kept her spine straight even as her chest twisted. Chloe continued. Therefore, as of this morning, 8 board members have signed the petition to invoke the takeover clause. Adrian's breathing stilled, but Harper lifted her chin. And what is the clause exactly? Chloe looked amused. Oh, sweetheart, this is corporate law, not something from a medical textbook. Harper held her gaze. Explain it anyway. A few board members exchanged looks. Chloe's smile thinned. Very well. If Adrian fails to demonstrate stable leadership, or if a majority of the board expresses no confidence, control shifts to the interim chairman. Harper nodded slowly, absorbing every word. And what constitutes stable leadership? Chloe blinked. Excuse me, your metrics, Harper said calmly. What metrics determine whether he's unfit to lead? Adrian turned to her, slightly brows, furrowing with surprise and something like pride. The board shifted uncomfortably. Chloe laughed. Really, you think you can understand this process? Harper stepped forward, no tremble in her voice. I understand emergencies. I understand systems collapsing because one person failed to communicate clearly. I understand how dangerous assumptions can be. So yes, explain the metrics. Murmurs filled the room. Chloe's jaw tightened. Fine, she snapped. Leadership fitness is measured by risk mitigation, asset control, and secure management of intellectual property. As you well know, Adrian has lost control of the encryption algorithm. Harper's heart pounded. This was it. She reached calmly toward her shoulder, pulling the hoodie down just enough to reveal the edge of the glowing patch beneath her collarbone. Gasps exploded around the room. Chloe's eyes widened. What is that? Adrian's voice was smooth, lethal. The reason your takeover just failed. He stepped beside Harper, not in front of her this time, beside her equal. The Life Vault encryption key is bonded to my wife, Adrian, said each word slicing cleanly through the air. She holds full legal authority to control its access, which means as of this moment, Harper finished for him, voice steady as a pulse line. Adrian has complete operational security. The room erupted in chaos. Impossible. That patch requires physical compatibility, She's not cleared. This violates. Chloe slammed a hand on the table. This is a stunt, a desperate, irresponsible enough. Harper's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It simply hit the room with unexpected force. You can call it desperate, she continued, but it's not irresponsible. Adrian did what any leader would do. He protected his company when no one else could, when you were too busy plotting to replace him. Chloe's face reddened. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, Harper said, stepping closer to the table. I do. She met each board member's gaze. You want leadership metrics. Let's go through them. Silence, shocked silence. Harper lifted her chin. Risk mitigation. Adrian secured the most critical asset Vailtech owns and ensured it was impossible to steal. Asset control. The encryption key is now safer than it has ever been. Intellectual property management. He prevented a catastrophic breach before it even began. She let her gaze fall on Chloe. That sounds like stable leadership to me. Chloe sputtered. She's emotional. She's biased. She's his wife. Harper smiled coolly. I'm a trauma nurse. I make life or death decisions in seconds. Emotion doesn't cloud my judgment, it sharpens it. Several board members exchanged looks, their hardened expressions shifting. One murmured, she has a point. Another nodded. And the asset is secure. Adrian looked at Harper with something fierce in his eyes. Admiration, disbelief, awe. Chloe's composure cracked. This is outrageous. You can't possibly take her seriously. Harper interrupted, then take the patch seriously. It's legally bound to me, and as long as it is, your takeover is dead. Dead silence. And then, the board chair cleared his throat. Ms. Laurent, he said calmly, your petition is invalidated. Chloe spun toward him furious. You can't, it's done. She turned toward Adrian, shaking with rage. You think you won today? You think hiding behind your nurse will save you? Harper stepped in, her voice soft but dangerous. He didn't hide behind me. She took Adrian's hand. We stood together. Adrian stared at her like she'd just rewritten something inside him. Chloe glared at them both. This isn't over. Harper squeezed Adrian's hand. It is for today. The board began dispersing, murmuring among themselves, glancing respectfully at Harper, now instead of dismissively. Adrian didn't move. He just stared at her, at the woman who had walked in a stranger and walked out a queen. Harper, he whispered, reverent shaken. You saved me again. She smiled, breath trembling. Then we're even. Not even, he murmured, lifting their joined hands. Not even close. 6 months later, Los Angeles glittered beneath a lavender dusk, the kind of evening that made the entire city look softer, kinder, like someone had laid a silk veil across the skyline. Harper stood on the rooftop of Vale Tower, the wind sweeping through her hair, as she adjusted the collar of her navy blazer, something she never imagined owning, much less wearing, as the director of the newly established Vale Care Foundation. 6 months ago, she was a nurse in an overworked ER, exhausted, invisible, drowning under medical bills for her sister. Now she oversaw a team of 60 funding emergency care for low-income patients, rewriting policies that had failed families like hers. And yet every time she walked through the gleaming glass doors of the Foundation's headquarters, people didn't see a billionaire's wife, they saw her. Harper Lane Vale, a woman who had survived impossible storms and turned them into shelter for others. But tonight wasn't about work. Tonight was something else. Something her pulse felt before her mind did. She sensed Adrian before she heard him, the quiet shift of air, the warm presence that always made her chest loosen no matter how tense she was. Still working? He asked softly, stepping behind her. Adrian Vale looked different these days, not softer but steadier, like the sharp edges that once cut him from the inside had finally found a place to rest. His silver-touched hair lifted in the breeze, his tie-loosened sleeves rolled up the kind of effortless elegance that made entire boardrooms hold their breath. Harper smiled without turning. I finished an hour ago. Then why are you hiding up here? I'm not hiding, she said. I'm thinking. Adrian stepped beside her, his gaze following the line of headlights snaking along. The 405, the distant hum of a city that never slept. About Harper exhaled. Everything, the takeover, the patch, the past 6 months. It feels like I lived an entire lifetime since the night you told me you needed to put something inside me. Adrian groaned dramatically, pinching the bridge of his nose. God, don't remind me. Worst wording of my entire life. She laughed a soft, warm sound that seemed to melt into the twilight. You nearly gave me a heart attack. I nearly gave myself one, he said. Then his voice softened. But you saved me. Again and again. He wasn't wrong. After the boardroom war, Chloe Laurent attempted 3 more power plays. Each one failed because Harper was always 2 steps ahead. Strategic in ways Adrian had never been able to be. She didn't operate from ego. She operated from clarity, empathy, and a lifetime of reading people in their most vulnerable moments. She had become the emotional compass of Valetech without ever asking for the title. Harper turned toward him fully, now leaning her hip against the edge of the glass railing. How was the earnings call? Adrian smirked. We exceeded projections. Again. And the press confused, he said with a shrug. They don't know what to do with a CEO who's actually happy. Harper's breath caught. It still surprised her sometimes how easily he said things like that. Adrian Vale didn't used to admit emotions. Now he confessed them like truths he no longer feared. Silence settled between them, not awkward but full like a shared exhale. Harper looked out at the city. You know, 6 months ago I didn't think I belonged in your world. Adrian's expression softened. Harper? Let me finish, she whispered. I thought I was a misfit, too rough, too tired, too ordinary. But I wasn't. I was just in the wrong life. Adrian stepped closer, just an inch, but it felt like something inside the universe shifted. You've never been ordinary, he murmured. And you were never the wrong anything. You are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Her breath trembled. You mean that, every word. A moment stretched, delicate as glass. Then Harper's phone buzzed. She glanced down. It was her sister, Mia. Got the scholarship paperwork. I start med school next fall. I can't breathe, Harper. This is real. Harper pressed a hand over her mouth, fighting tears. Adrian's eyes softened even more. Good news, she nodded. The best. Adrian didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, grounding her as her emotions rushed upward. You did that, he whispered. You changed her life. Harper leaned into him, letting her forehead brush his jaw. We did, she corrected. Adrian held her tighter, and for a moment the city faded. The wind faded. Everything faded except the quiet truth. They had built something real, something neither of them thought they deserved. When Harper finally pulled back, Adrian cleared his throat, suddenly. Nervous. The billionaire who terrified Congress, who stared down hostile investors without blinking, looked terrified. What's wrong? Harper asked. Nothing, he lied. Badly. She raised a brow. Adrian. He exhaled, defeated. Okay, there's something I need to tell you, or rather, ask you. Harper's heart stumbled. Adrian stepped back just enough to reach into his pocket. Instantly, Harper froze. "Wait," she whispered. "Is this yes?" he said. "But don't freak out. You're the one freaking out." She countered, voice thin. He gave a strangled half-laugh. "Fair." Then slowly, reverently, he dropped to one knee. Harper's breath caught like a gasp trapped inside glass. "Adrian." "Let me say it," he whispered, voice shaking. He opened a velvet box, not titanium, not intimidating. Not bound by corporate war, just velvet. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd ever seen. A sapphire the color of a deep ocean, surrounded by a halo of diamonds, simple but breathtaking. Adrian looked up, eyes bright with unspoken emotion. "The first time I married you, I didn't deserve it. I dragged you into chaos. I gave you fear before I gave you love. I handed you a corporate war instead of a home. And you stayed. You fought. You healed pieces of me I didn't know were broken." Harper's throat closed. Adrian continued. "This time, I'm not putting anything inside your body." His smile wobbled. "I'm putting this inside our future." Harper let out a watery laugh. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Adrian reached for her hand. "Harper Lane Vale, will you marry me?" "Not for a clause, not for a company, just for us." Her chest felt too full, too tight, too overwhelmed to contain the storm of love rising inside her. She knelt down too, mirroring him until their foreheads touched. "Yes," she whispered. "Adrian?" "Yes." His breath shuddered. "Are you sure the only thing I'm sure of in this world," she said, cupping his face, "is you?" The wind rushed around them as if celebrating. Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, perfect fit, as if destiny had taken her measurements itself. Harper stared at it, stunned. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Not the biggest ring I've ever seen, but the most meaningful." Adrian brushed his thumb across her cheek. "That's because the biggest thing between us was never the ring." Harper smiled through tears. "What was it?" "The way you believed in me," he whispered, "even when I didn't." Harper kissed him slow, deep, tender, a kiss that tasted like new beginnings, like forgiveness, like a future that wasn't borrowed or forced but chosen. Together they stood framed by the glittering city. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, watching the lights shimmer below them. So Harper murmured, "What happens now?" Adrian smiled against her skin. "Now we build something new." Together, she whispered, "Always." And under the violet sky, surrounded by wind and light and everything they had survived, Harper finally understood. The biggest thing she ever saw wasn't wealth power or the impossible world she had stepped into. It was love. Real, steady, fierce love, the kind that didn't ask her to be small or perfect, or anyone but herself, the kind that knew her scars, the kind that chose her anyway. And as Adrian tightened his hold on her, brushing a kiss against her temple, she knew with absolute certainty this was only the beginning. If this story touched even the smallest corner of your heart tonight, I want you to pause for a moment, breathe, and tell me something real. Tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. Are you lying in bed in Texas at 2 a.m. with the lights off scrolling to find something that makes you feel less alone? Are you sitting on your couch in New York City after a long shift, finally letting yourself feel something soft and human again? Are you in London with the sunrise just beginning to glow against your window, or somewhere in the Philippines, listening to this while the rain taps gently against your roof? Tell us. Don't be shy. This community is built from people just like you. People looking for stories that heal them a little, hold them a little. Remind them that even in the chaos of real life, love can still be tender, surprising, brave. And if Harper and Adrian's journey meant something to you, if it reminded you that you too deserve a love that doesn't shrink, you doesn't use, you doesn't crush your fire, then let me know by dropping A or typing "I believe in love again." Seriously, say it, claim it, whisper it into your screen if you need to. I believe in love again. Because this story wasn't just about a billionaire. It wasn't just about a nurse who thought she wasn't enough. It was about finding a place where your scars don't scare someone away. Where your strength is something someone protects, not punishes. Where love isn't perfect, but it's real. And if you want more stories like that, stories that hit your soul with emotions you didn't even know you were holding, make sure you're subscribed. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter, the next world, the next couple who will make you feel alive again. We post new emotional stories every single week, sometimes every single day. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. The next story. Oh, it's something special. It's passionate. It's dramatic. It's heartbreaking in the beginning and breathtaking in the end. And if you love misunderstanding hooks, accidental marriages, billionaires who fall first, soft men with broken hearts, or women who rise from the ashes, then the next one was written just for you. But right now, before you go, I want to know the truth. What line from this story hit you the hardest? Was it when Harper whispered, "Strong doesn't mean unbreakable," and Adrian finally understood? Was it when he said, "I'm not putting anything inside your body. I'm putting this inside our future"? Or was it when Harper walked into the boardroom and the world finally saw her strength the way Adrian did from the beginning? Comment your favorite moment. Tell me what made you cry, what made you gasp, what made you believe. Your comments help this channel grow. Help YouTube show these stories to more people. Help someone out there hear exactly the words they needed tonight. So don't scroll away quietly. Stay, speak, share, and if you're new here, welcome home. This channel is your safe place to feel. Thank you for being here, for listening, for letting this story live in your heart for even a few minutes. Now tell me, what time is it where you are? And what country, state, or city are you listening from? I can't wait to read your comments.